Welcome, listeners. You are listening to the Crime Tales from Travels podcast, the show where we highlight crimes from places we have been. Maybe we've traveled to or and from. Sometimes we might have even just passed through. Now, I'm your host. You can call me Cairo. And today we have an episode planned for you from Salt Lake City, a location where we spent some time vacationing for a few days before and after I had a work conference in Park City, Utah. So we had a conference in Park City, put on a few days in the front and a few days on the end of the conference, and we spent that time in Salt Lake City. Let's review quickly, if we can, the premise of the podcast. Locations make the list if either my spouse or myself have traveled to that location. Maybe we've spent time there. If we have traveled through that location, maybe on a road trip, you get the idea that we're not just picking places where crimes have occurred, but we are choosing locations that are personal to us in some way, and we are then seeking to share those with you. And today's location, as I mentioned, is Salt Lake City, Utah. And I noted that my spouse and I had traveled there to spend a few days after a work conference. So we flew into Salt Lake City. We spent a couple of days exploring. We drove to Park City. We weren't sure our rental car was going to make it to the top of the mountain where my conference was, but it did. And then I did my work thing, and it was a really great location. But then at the end of that conference, we came back down and spent a little bit more time in the Salt Lake City area. Something I don't share too much of is information about my day job. And that's on purpose. I still won't necessarily share too much. But the context is I work in higher education. So touring university campuses, it's fun for me. I'm a dork. My spouse used to work in higher education as well. These are things that we enjoy. So on our trip back down after the conference, we got to tour the University of Utah campus. And to say that it's gorgeous was just an absolute understatement. Even today when we talk about that trip, we appreciate that campus walk and just having that opportunity. Unfortunately, we were, there at a time after the fact. There were a couple of heinous crimes that had taken place. And we're going to dig into one of those today. So even though it's an absolutely gorgeous campus where you have the likes of maybe what Bob Ross would be talking about with the mountains in the background, and it was June, but there was still snow on the mountains, with just an absolutely gorgeous tree-filled campus, it can sometimes be a dangerous place, like many other places. Before we dig too far into that, please don't forget to subscribe. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram and just search Crime Tales from Travels. You can also find the information about this particular podcast in the show notes on the website kairoproductions.net. If you see a puppy back here, that's probably Bella. If you hear some other ruckus going on, that's probably her little sister, Scout. Before we get too far underway, though, I did mention my day job. It's in higher ed, and I have to be honest when I say things like these cases that happen on university campuses, they hit me differently. I'm not necessarily going to say too much more about my day job other than, generally speaking, I work in higher ed. But for the sentiment of this podcast, and because of what it is that I do for an actual living, these cases on university, they just hit me differently. And a place where people are learning to be or figuring out who they are going to be as they kind of leave childhood and early adulthood and into adulthood itself. It's supposed to be a place of exploration and not necessarily tragedy. They just hit me differently. And with that in mind, though, I want to take a moment to remember the family and friends of Lauren McCluskey and those of whom that she cared about. I can't imagine what they are going through, particularly, and we'll touch on this in the podcast, but for how many times she sought help. Lauren sought help. Her mom even reached out to Campus PD and sought help. But unfortunately, her requests were just not heard to the extent that we would hope that they would have been. Okay, now, imagine it's a quiet campus at night. There's the footsteps, there's some phone ring, there's some door, buzzing, opening. A university campus can be quite busy at night. It can also be kind of quiet and serene. But it was on a cold October night in 2018 when the University of Utah student, Lauren McCluskey, was walking back to her residence hall after class, unaware that a man that had been stalking her for weeks was already waiting for her in the shadows. And within minutes, 21-year-old Lauren would be dead. And the warning signs that she reported again and again had been ignored. So this is the story of Lauren McCluskey, a standout star track athlete, a good student, a communication major, a daughter, a friend, a young woman whose life had been stolen by a man who lied about everything about him, who he was, his name, his age, his past, and his intentions. And unfortunately, her murder would expose some, it pains me to say this about fellow higher ed colleagues, but catastrophic failures of UPD, Salt Lake City PD, things that would just spark a national outrage, and honestly force a university to kind of confront the consequences of the situation. Let's talk a little bit about who Lauren McCluskey was, though. She grew up in Pullman, Washington. She was a high-achieving student, a heptathlete, and someone who her teammates described as somebody who was disciplined and kind and kind of very quietly fierce. In 2018, she was a senior at the University of Utah. She was balancing track as a full-time athlete, classes, and a tight-knit circle of friends. But in early September of that year, she had met someone who would change everything. On September 2nd of 2018, Lauren met a man at a local bar where he worked as a bouncer. He introduced himself as Sean Fields. He said he was 28. He said he worked, obviously as security as the bouncer at that bar that they met, but that he was also a student at nearby Salt Lake City Community College. They hit it off instantly when they met. They exchanged phone numbers with the intent to hang out again, and they did hang out. And Lauren's friend said that she quickly was kind of very quite taken with Sean. It was reported that Lauren had even called her mom, Jill, to talk to her about this new guy that she met named Sean. And Lauren described him as sweet, noting that he took her to dinner, he bought her flowers, and just very kind of kindly and quietly had asked her to be his girlfriend. They were in a quick relationship, and Sean would be seen on the video footage of the residence hall, kind of coming and going from the building where Lauren lived. So obviously he was staying with Lauren. And early on in the relationship, Lauren would loan Sean her car. They seemed fine, and everything was good. And they seemed fine until they weren't. Turns out this relationship was built on lies. We'll learn that none of what he told her was true. His real name was Melvin Sean Rowland. He was 37 years old and a convicted sex offender out on parole. And Lauren didn't know. And for a few weeks, their relationship seemed absolutely normal, like any new relationship. But by late September, Lauren began noticing some inconsistencies. Lauren's friends started feeling a little bit uneasy. Something about him just didn't add up. When Lauren would be out with her friends, Sean would call and ask what she's doing. He was concerned about what she was wearing when she happened to be out with friends. He would question what time she would be home, and if she didn't answer the phone immediately, he would question her about what took her so long to respond. And initially, Lauren just kind of wrote this off, kind of not really thinking anything of it. She would say to her friends that Sean had some insecurities because he'd been treated very badly in a previous relationship. Perhaps Lauren really thought that these concerning behaviors might go away over time as he learned to trust her. At some point, though, Lauren completely began, stopped hanging out with her friends, spending time outside of class and track practice, just almost exclusively with Sean. Her friends were concerned, and it's reported that her friends even contacted the residence hall staff where Lauren lived. The staff were had apparently indicated that they had noticed Sean kind of coming and going, that he was hanging out there quite a bit, and apparently the housing staff was too. They had noticed, they said that Lauren wasn't quite taking as good of care of herself as what she used to. But even more serious than that, it's reported that the staff expressed concerns that Sean had even started kind of tracking Lauren's movements across campus. So then the day came, and Lauren is finding out the truth. She happened to catch a view of Sean's photo ID, and Sean wasn't who he claimed to be. She didn't know it yet, but he had a criminal history with multiple aliases and a pattern of manipulation. But she saw on that ID that day that his real name was Melvin Sean Rowland and that he was 37 years old. Obviously, this would shake someone to their core when you learn that the person that you've been seeing is not who they say that they are. But then fall break rolls around, and it's October 5th around this point, and she's traveling back home to Pullman, Washington to spend autumn break. And while she was there, a friend of hers, she confided in a friend of hers, and that friend had suggested, let's do some digging, let's do some research, let's figure out who is this Melvin Sean Rowland individual. And a quick internet search yielded some very disturbing information. They learned that he was a registered sex offender, and that on July 19th of 2004, Rowland had been convicted of enticing a minor and attempted forcible sexual abuse. For this, he had served 9 years in the state penitentiary. So imagine this. Imagine being this young girl and learning that your boy, learning this about your boyfriend, and she knew she needed to end the relationship. Lauren returned to campus post-autumn break, and then she called him, and she had intended to end the relationship. He came over, and this was, I think, around October 9th, if I'm remembering the timeline correctly. But Rowland apparently stayed the night in the residence hall, and they didn't break up in that moment. It's reported that Lauren told her friends later, like the next day, that he had apologized and explained the incident that they read about online, that he was at a frat party. And the girl said she was much older than what she actually was. And, Lauren's friends, rightfully so, didn't buy it. And they pushed her to end the relationship. And Lauren did agree. But before fully breaking up with him again, she said that she loaned him her car again. To some extent, she'd been keeping her parents in the loop. She had told her mom that she was loaning Rowland the car again. And like any other parent, she is worried, right? Her daughter is telling her that she's loaned this car out to this guy who is not who he says that she was, and she's supposed to get it back from him later that night. So in that situation, what do you think mom does, right? Well, mom, Jill McCluskey, calls up the University of Utah Public Safety office, and she says, hey, I need some help from my daughter. Can I have someone go with her or just be present when she goes to get her car back or do this exchange for her vehicle? And she's describing the situation to the dispatcher. So the dispatcher at UPD then called Lauren and asked if she felt comfortable going and doing this exchange or getting her car back from Rowland, alone. And Lauren initially said that she thought it would be okay. The dispatcher pushed a little bit and said, I know mom was concerned. I do have an officer on standby. He's actually doing escorts across campus tonight. He can be present while you get your vehicle back. Does that sound okay with you? And Lauren said, you know what, that would be great. And apparently the exchange that night went fine, and Lauren got her car back without incident. See? Where's she at? She's so cute. She's so cute. Anyway. So Lauren gets her car back that night without incident. The next couple of days go by kind of like normal for a college student, but then she starts getting some disturbing text messages coming in. And some of the texts were not necessarily Melvin himself that she thought, but they were texts about him. And they were texts saying that he had been in an accident and he was in the hospital, and asked if she wanted to go visit him, and then did she want to go to his funeral. But then she later got a text message from him, and he was indicating that he was alive and fine. And she said she thought whoever they was, she wasn't sure if it was Melvin or somebody else at the moment, but when she called, dispatch, she said, I think they are trying to lure me somewhere. She had called the police dispatch, and she had blocked some of the numbers, and as more and more text messages from these unknown numbers came in, they had some somebody said they had some compromising photos of her and Melvin, and this text message demanded $1,000 or they would release these images to everyone. And they had even sent one of the photos to her as proof. And Melvin had emailed Lauren saying he too was being blackmailed, and he then just encouraged her to pay. So she did. She sent $1,000 out of Venmo to someone out of fear. She didn't know exactly what to do, but she kept reporting everything to campus police. So between October 10th and October 22nd, she had reached out more than 20 times by phone, in person, in written statements, and she started to feel like Melvin was behind all of it. She told UPD she was being extorted. She told them she feared for her safety. There's UPD footage of her going to the police station with a friend in person, but the officers handling the case didn't necessarily act with urgencies. It's reported that the officers told her this is probably just a scam and you're probably not in any real danger. One of the officers, I believe his name was Officer Miguel Deras, said that he even saved her private photos to his personal phone. That's a violation if we've ever, thought of one. And that would come to be known later. But it was reported that he also had told others that that compromising photo was now his and he could look at it anytime he wanted. The video footage shows Lauren leaving UPD, though, with that friend, thinking that she done what she had needed to do to help inform them, but also to help try to keep herself safe. But the system seemed to keep failing her. She didn't hear back from UPD. Later investigations would reveal that nothing was done. And when Lauren didn't hear back from UPD, she's calling public safety again, and she's trying to get some sort of response from UPD. But it gets weirder, if you can even imagine this. On October 19th, Melvin returned to Lauren's residence hall, and he was dressed in Marvel character Deadpool, kind of complete with those two swords, strapped to his back. And something else that was highly concerning, Lauren was receiving communication from Melvin. He had said he knew she contacted the police. In that moment, it's reported that people assumed that Lauren assumed that she had reached out to UPD. Because she had reached out to UPD, somehow UPD had contacted Melvin, and they were reaching out to him. So she thought this was the process working, like UPD was reaching out to him. But what Lauren didn't know at the time, she hadn't remembered using Melvin's phone to log into email, and he had saved her password. Melvin now had access to that. So if there was any correspondence with UPD going to her email, he was now seeing that. Lauren had also contacted the Salt Lake City Police Department, separate from UPD, again seeking assistance because she hadn't heard anything back from UPD at the University of Utah. Her call to the Salt Lake City Police indicated that she hadn't heard back from UPD, but she found out that her harasser knew that she had contacted UPD. She said she had concerns of a, quote, insider, and honestly, at that point, Salt Lake City PD said, we don't have jurisdiction over that. We need to refer you back to the University of Utah, University Police Department. I did listen to the dispatch conversation. Could she have sounded a little paranoid with the phrase, quote, insider? I suppose. She did sound nervous, I'll tell you that. But I can also see how she might not have been able to, out of fear in the moment, to fully articulate what her concerns might have been. For Salt Lake City Police to think, this isn't our case. We don't have that jurisdiction. We just need to send it back to University Police Department. So with that, she emailed UPD again. She confided in her mom that she thought that she was just annoying the officers at UPD, and telephone records showed that she had called UPD and or Salt Lake City Police Department on multiple occasions over multiple days, just trying to seek some sort of assistance. So a couple more days pass. It's now Monday, October 22nd, 2018. And we see video footage eventually showing Melvin Rowland leaving his apartment at around 6 a.m. He had borrowed a silver Buick from a neighbor. And around 6:30 a.m., he approached the residence hall where Lauren lived, but he was not able to gain entry. Lauren leaves her residence hall at around 9 a.m. Now, reports also indicate that she had received a message claiming to be from Deputy McLennan, I believe the name was, saying that he had some evidence for her to review, but he asked her in that message to not call him back because he would be in a meeting. And this just sounded really suspicious to Lauren, so she did not go to do that, but she instead went to a counseling appointment that she had made instead to deal with a breakup, to deal with the anxiety of these calls and messages and just what she was going through. So she goes to that appointment, and then she leaves, and as she leaves a few minutes later, Melvin comes in and just misses Lauren. Maybe it was, at the student center or something, but either way, the video footage shows her leaving and then Melvin entering a few minutes later. When he misses her, Melvin goes to Lauren's residence hall, and he talks his way in. He's apparently chatting with 4 guys, and throughout the course of the conversation, 3 of those 4 guys leave and 1 remains. And Melvin had been he was seen on this footage carrying a small black bag with him. So he asked the remaining guy, once he had gained entry into Lauren's residence hall, "Hey, you want to see what's in my bag?" And it was a small handgun. Melvin even apparently let the student handle the gun before taking it back, and then they parted ways. So the day is progressing, and Lauren has spent the day on campus, went to class. I think it was a Saturday class that she had gone to, but it was a night course that she had, and she had texted her parents, as she often did. Actually, scratch that. If I'm not mistaken, she had called her parents, as she often did, as she was walking home. And it was around 8:20 p.m., and she's walking towards the residence hall. She's chatting on the phone with her mother, and then all of a sudden she's like, "Mom, I think he's here." Her mom and her dad, who also happened to be on the phone, they heard Lauren scream, and then that call disconnected. Lauren's dad, Matt, hearing this, calls 911 on their landline phone. What they didn't know at the time, but what had happened, was that Melvin had grabbed her, he had forced her into a car, and he had shot her multiple times, I think 7 times, almost at point blank range. And then he left her body in the back seat, and then he fled. Lauren's parents, though, they're working with campus police. They've obviously contacted them, but it took over an hour for officers to begin searching, and her body wasn't found until later on that night. Now, Melvin Rowland fled campus. He acted like nothing had happened. Reports and video indicate he was waiting at a stop to be picked up because he was going on a date. He had met someone and planned a date, and that date picks him up, and they go to dinner, and they go for a walk. But all this is going on, recall, as they were on campus and students heard shots. So eventually UPD is having these individuals kind of, secure in place, locked down in place. And officers are, eventually coming to the scene, and they're looking for her. And eventually they find the silver Buick, and she is deceased inside. Now, when they find her, police know who to look for. They've been warned for weeks. When police finally identified him as the subject, they tracked him to Salt Lake City, and just after midnight, officers spotted him, and Rowland was running into a church building, and as police closed in, they heard a single gunshot. Melvin Rowland had taken his own life inside of that church. Now, Lauren's murder sparked national outrage, not just because of the brutality, but because of the systematic failures that preceded it. How could someone begging for help be seemingly ignored? Gosh, and that hurts to say out loud. That really does. But the investigations later revealed campus police had not checked on Rowland's criminal history. They did not recognize extortion as a serious crime. They did not follow up on any key evidence. They did not escalate the case, despite repeated warnings. One officer who had mishandled her private photos, kind of later showing them to coworkers, ultimately the University of Utah publicly admitted that they had failed Lauren. Her parents filed a lawsuit, which the university settled for around $10.5 million, I believe, with a commitment to major safety reform. But as we think about her and her life, Lauren's life wasn't necessarily just defined by this murder, by her murder. She was defined by her discipline, her kindness. She apparently had a love of animals. She was very dedicated to track. Obviously, to be a D1 athlete, you have to be. And everyone had always kind of noted that she just kind of had this quiet strength as she went throughout life. Her parents created the Lauren McCluskey Foundation, it's focused on campus safety, dating violence, awareness, and for amateur athletics as well. And her story continues to change policies across the country. Lauren did a lot right that night, leading up to. She recognized the danger. She asked for help from multiple outlets, multiple times. She went in person, she wrote, she called. The system she trusted that was designed to protect her, unfortunately, failed her. Her story is a reminder that when victims speak, people, institutions, we must listen, because ignoring warning signs can just be negligence. And negligence can unfortunately be deadly. This case was intense and upsetting. Many of the cases are, but as I mentioned at the onset, the university cases hit me differently. They just hit me differently, given what I do for a living. But if you like episodes like this, you can find our podcast, Crime Tales from Travels, on Spotify and Apple, wherever you find your podcasts. You can also catch the video podcast on YouTube. And until next time, let's remember to stay safe, stay curious, and also remember that the truth is often stranger and more disturbing than fiction.